Welcome to Created Healthy. I'm Dawn Combs. It's a common idea that God gave us everything we need in nature, but do we believe it enough to walk that out in truth? Often the very same people who say this go looking for answers on how to use food and medicine from man-made sources. Everything man creates comes with a user's manual. Why would God be any different? I challenge you to join me in seeking revelation about our body, mind, soul, and spirit health by digging into His written word and in practicing pure science in the visible world of His creation. We're back looking at some of the myth-busting, the dogma-busting things about women. Again, today we're in Numbers 27 through 30. And this is, here in 27, we have Moses, coming to the end of his story. God is telling him that I'm going to ask you to go up onto the mountain here, and you get to look over the promised land. You're going to get to see it, what that must have looked like after all of the trouble that he's been through, to look and see the beauty of what Israel is going to move into. But you don't get to go. And in fact, you're going to go up the mountain, you're going to get to see it, and then you're going to die, and I'm going to gather you in. And Moses, I think, must have accepted this. I mentioned before, I think in some way this is probably a relief. I think he's tired, he's old, he's sick of dealing with the Israelites. He's been carrying the weight of leadership for a really long time, and he is concerned about Israel falling apart and kind of getting lost, because he has a lot of reason for that when he's not around. So he is asking God here for a strong leader to succeed him. And God names Joshua. And this is a combination of Joshua's faithfulness as a spy in seeing everything that is scary over in the promised land and still speaking out that God's got us, God's going to walk before us, everything's fine. He has already stepped up and proven that he is going to be that right person to lead Israel. Then we have another boring section here in chapter 28 and 29, which again, I tend to, if I'm not taking notes, I will gloss over this and just miss. It's just a whole lot of boring day after day after day, lists of things that need to be sacrificed. And in this case, the sacrifices are detailed for every day. And I had to double check that, because we know that there are sacrifices for when you do something wrong, and when you're happy, and when you make a vow. And then there are sacrifices on feast days. And I thought maybe I was just rereading that same information over. But no, this is really entrenching. If you read through here, it's really saying, look, this relationship that you need to have with God, or that God desires to have with his people, it needs to be every day. You can't just go to church on Sunday and then go be with the world the rest of the days. You have to be going to the tabernacle and being aware and giving up of yourself to God, and having God in your mind and carrying that through your day every single day. And so there's this system here of offerings that are being laid out for the days of the week. And that's something that I hadn't realized was going on, but it does make it sort of special. It's something that I try to do. I don't want to just go to church on Sunday and feel like, whew, I did my church, did my God for the week, check that box, and now I don't have to do God for the rest of the time. You need to be mindful. You need to be spending time in your Bible every day. You need to be walking out in his creation and appreciating what's there every single day. And if you're not, then you're missing out. At the very least, you're missing out on something that he's wanting to direct you to do. He's showing you the blessings and the miracles that are all around you. And you can also be stepping out of the path that you're supposed to be on pretty easily. The thing that I really want to go back to in this reading is the daughters of Zelophahad. This is a man that had come out of Manasseh's tribe, so one of Joseph's children. And we've gotten to this point here in the story of Israel where this tribe had lost so many of its men through things that God had smote people, and they had died, and there had been battles. And Zelophahad was the last male part of this tribe, and all he had then were daughters. And we have this awareness throughout the tribe that we're about to go into the promised land, and every different tribe of Israel is going to get land. You're going to connect to this land. It's going to take care of you. You're going to take care of it. There's going to have a covenant with the land, and it's going to be yours for all time. And you will have this stability and this security, and you're going to feel like you're coming home. And the daughters of Zelophahad are looking around and thinking, we don't have a male anymore to get our land. What's going to happen to us? And so they do something that is quite unheard of, and I don't think gets talked a lot about, because again, the dogma from a Christian, from an outsider to the Christian faith, is that women are chattel. They are furniture to be moved around and ordered around, and they're subservient, and that just isn't the case. The daughters of Zelophahad, still, even though God values women, this must have been so difficult. It must have taken so much courage for these women, because they had to come out of where they were camped, and they had to go down to the center near the tabernacle. And what they were doing was not done. Women didn't step out of their women's spaces and go into what would be traditionally a male space. They had to go down to where Moses was in front of the tent of meeting and talk with him and present their case. And so not only do they have to go into a male space and stand and speak their piece, but standing in front of the tent of meeting has classically not been a really safe place to be, and especially if you're doing something that is possibly going against God or stepping out of what prescribed roles are. They go in front of this tent of meeting, and I don't think we can't ignore what it must have taken for them to do that, and know that they're going to be judged, and know that if they are wrong in their calculations, that they're going to get wiped off the map, that they're going to get plague or be consumed by fire quickly. And I don't think, on the other hand, we can negate the importance of the fact that they didn't. I think the fact that they stepped forward and they were honest and open, and a lot of Jewish theologians, if you start to look at how they analyze this moment in their history, these women are presented as really using their knowledge of scripture, of written history, of law, of how their God worked and how their society worked. They didn't just go and demand something. They went with reasoned arguments that were thought out in a way that the men who were more learned and were spending all of the time studying the law, traditionally the men would have spoken in this way. And so we have these women who are standing in front of the tent of meeting, and they're presenting themselves very eloquently and very correctly, and they weren't burnt to the ground. They weren't stricken with plague. And so for all time, we have this proof that God did not have a problem with women stepping forward. He didn't have a problem with this. It wasn't just their womanness. They weren't supposed to be subservient and let whatever have happened to them happen. The fact that they stood forward and they stood in front of God meant that God welcomed them there. And in fact, they present their case to Moses and say, we shouldn't be wiped off the map. We should, just because we don't have a man to inherit, doesn't mean that we shouldn't also get to go into the land and have our own space. And Moses isn't sure about this because this is a new idea. This isn't what this hasn't been mentioned from God. And so he goes to God and he presents this case, and God says, yeah, the women are right. They are just. They are right to ask what they are asking. And in fact, it is seeking his heart for them to ask this, because they're looking for that surrogate relationship, that relationship with the land that is modeling our relationship with God caring for us. And so their land transfers to them, and a whole set of new laws are set up so that women are just as important. And I think it tells us today that women also, the God's design here was that women are to have this relationship with the land just as much as men. We are intended to understand God's providence for us, and we are intended to have these covenants alongside men. We are all intended to inherit this covenant and this connection to earth, soil, land that God ordained all the way back in our making. I pray that God is blessing you today and maybe busting up some of the things that you had thought about Christianity, things that are based in man-made ideas instead of what is actually written, or what we can see in the character of God in both his book and in what he has created all around us. Men and women are both part of the design here. They are equally necessary. They are equally important. And just as we cannot, to be fair, just as we cannot discount women, we cannot discount men like our society is trying to do now. That's another whole day, though. So I pray that God brings you back and joins in this discussion with me again on another day. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with a friend. And I'm always interested in hearing what God is laying on your heart. So drop me a rating or review, or join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at Dawn Combs Really.